sport of rowing, and I see a lot of new names on the list, and really welcome and hope that over the first half of this season you'll spend some good time with us at Ridderplaat and get to enjoy the officiating side of rowing. It's great fun. So the purpose of this evening's call is really just to give you some orientation so that on Saturday, when you get to the dam, you at least know who's doing what. You'll have a role, use that opportunity in that role to learn about that role. And this evening, we want to just give you some background on what being a rowing official is all about. So the agenda, I'm going to just give you a bit of interesting background on rowing, the organization, how we fit together, and then becoming an official. What's the pathway to get there? And then we're going to just have a brief look at all the different duties that officials are responsible for. Now, rowing, some of you may have rowed, some of you may not have rowed. Maybe your children have introduced you to the sport of rowing. That's where I came from. I've never rowed in my life before, but my daughter's a rower, so that's kind of like introduced me to rowing, and quickly learned this is in my opinion probably the king of sports. When it comes to team sports, it's one of the oldest sports with very strong traditions, and after track and field, it accounts for more medals at the Olympics than any other sport. Paralympics rowing has also been added to the program since 2008. So really a well-established sport in the international arena. The principles of rowing, it's a team and an individual sport. And as I said, probably the king of team sports. Because if that team's not all working together, that boat just doesn't do what it's meant to be doing. It's competitive and recreational, irrespective of age, gender, or ability. Next year you'll see when we have the Masters here, there are rowers of all ages that compete, and there's a handicap method to accommodate that so that everybody's on an even playing field. It's a great sport, getting people out into the water, creating awareness about environmental responsibility. If you look at the equipment of rowing, it's uniform. So this is really the ability of the athlete. Now, just a bit of history. If we look at modern rowing, one of the, or probably what is considered the oldest rowing event out there is the Doggett's Coat and Badge. It goes down the Thames, a scull race, which started back in 1715, and as far as I know, still happens. And then there's other famous ones like the Oxford-Cambridge race, was on the Thames. Henley Regatta also happens on the Thames, so a rich tradition. If we look at the international front, in 1892 already, the International Rowing Federation was formed, FISA. So that started, controlling the sport, and it's been one of the Olympic sports since 1896. So really a sporting event that's steeped in history. And if we look at on our shores, the first rowing event, or which is documented, there probably were some before that, but the first one that's documented was back in 1861. I think it was in Cape Town, I'm not quite sure, but it was between SA Rowing Club and the Union Rowing Club. So 6-oared boat race between the two. So that was back in 1861 already. The World Rowing Federation, FISA, this is the national rowing body that keeps it all together, governs the sport of rowing. It has 152 member countries, and you can see there are a lot of disciplines in which we sort of like keep the sport: elite rowing, para rowing, under 23s, junior, university, masters, coastal, and indoor. So those are the disciplines, and FISA is really what keeps it all together, and we're obviously a member of FISA. So coming home to South Africa, the head of our rowing and what reports into FISA is Rosa. And ROSA has all these constituent members, being South African Schools Rowing, which is what our schools clubs belong to, SASRU. And there's the Junior Clubs Rowing Association, the Universities Sports of South Africa Rowing, and then the different provincial associations, Gauteng, Western Cape, Eastern Cape, and KwaZulu-Natal. And ROSA has an executive team. Sean Kerr is the chair. And what's of importance to us here is this one division here, SASROC, where we have Herman van Velze as our chair, because SAROC, the South African Rowing Officials Commission, this is the commission that sort of like manages us as officials, make sure that the rules of racing are up to date, and all the safety standards are maintained. They publish the official training manual and maintain that training manual. They're responsible for seeing that the national examination is of a standard, that we make sure that all officials that we bring into national level are at the correct standard required. So evaluating the trainees. They maintain the register of the officials, are also responsible for organizing and conducting regular seminars so that we remain well on top of all the rules and regulations of rowing, establish the standards for rowing courses. And whenever we have national or national championship regattas, they make sure that we have national officials, so suitably qualified officials that are actually officiating at those. They also interaction with World Rowing, SASCOC, and the drug-free sport. So SAROC is really, that body that looks after us as officials. From the SAROC camp, we have the rules of racing and the Rowing Officials Handbook. As officials, these are kind of like our reference documents. And if you go to our Grower website, www.grower.co.za, there's actually a link over there to those two documents. And for those of you that are serious about, going beyond just being volunteers and actually following up and becoming qualified officials, those are two documents worthwhile downloading and familiarizing yourself with. Gives you all the different rules and regulations that guide our sport. We also abide to a code of conduct. As rowing officials, we have a duty to provide all the participating athletes a quality and fair sporting experience in a friendly, supportive, and instructive and safe environment. So, to do that, we need to know our rules. We want to be sure that we're punctual, reliable, and when we're on the water, even though we belong to certain schools, we behave in an impartial and unbiased way. Behave appropriately and show respect and tolerance to all. We're often dealing with very young rowers that are new on the water. We've got to be patient with them and help them along. So, we show that tolerance and respect. Everybody starts somewhere. Contribute in a constructive manner, respectful to other person's rights and dignity. Not to engage in aggressive behavior, verbal or physical. It's not called for. Take good care of all property assigned to us. Be sensitive to the needs of all athletes, and take responsible action to ensure the safety of all. Safety, you'll see later on, is really one of our key responsibilities, to ensure safety on the water. As a rowing official, we also have the right to be treated with respect, and we also have the right to express our personal opinions freely and participate in decision making. Be objective and supportive to your colleagues. Attend meetings, participate in decision making and abide by decisions. Earn the respect of rowers, colleagues, and supporters through your actions and behaviors. Instill discipline and implement rules of racing with consistency and fairness. Be sensitive to the needs firm yet fair and respectful, and exercise self-discipline and be accountable for your actions and decisions. So really, we want to strive for excellence in the profession. So that why make this commitment? It's a lovely sport, but it just means so much more if you actually know and understand the rules. So becoming an official, you've got a reason now to get to understand those rules. Keep the races safe, fair, and well managed. This is an opportunity to participate in your child's sport and to contribute to the enjoyment your child has in rowing by helping keeping the races running smoothly. As a spectator, rowing, you're sitting out on the bank, the action's happening in the middle of the dam. Here's an opportunity for you to get closer to the athletes, to actually get out on the water and see close up the pain, the joy, the effort that goes into rowing. Feel that adrenaline of your kids as they do it. There's nothing better than that final eights race at the end of the day when you've got these young strapping lads, 17, 18-year-olds. You can actually smell the testosterone on the water as they're going out there. It's great to be among the kids and really enjoy that with them. So, get out there, challenge you, do posts on the land, get out on the water. It's really a great experience to just have that fun among the kids instead of just sitting out on the bank. What's the route to become an official? It is a bit of a journey. We have introductory trainings like these where, in a couple of slides, Evelyn will give you some information on the different officialing stations. We then, ask you to start as a volunteer trainee. So there are certain positions where, you don't need to know all the rules yet, but it gets you involved. A control commission, checking boats, on the water, being a pilot, or being the pilot for a marshal, or later on becoming a marshal. These are all roles that you can fulfill as a trainer. And while you're a pilot on a boat, an umpire is going to give you an opportunity and give you some training and maybe let you take a race down if it's not a national or championship regatta. So in that way, you get some experience. So that then takes you into the theory training. When you do the theory training, having been there, seen it, it all makes a lot more sense. And then twice a year, we try and set up an exam, and that's officiated by Herman van Velze and the Sarah people. You pass that with a 75% mark. You then become an intermediate official. So as an intermediate official, we now put you through a practical phase, usually at least one season of rowing, where you'll have opportunity to umpire, you'll have opportunity to take on some of the more, onerous positions in the timekeeping box and so on, still under the supervision of somebody who is a national umpire, but, get you into that training. And all the time, the national umpires will be vetting, how are you progressing? And then once a year, when the statutory AGM happens, we have the opportunity to put forward names of officials that we feel are suitably qualified and can actually now become a national umpire. So to become a national umpire is a journey of between 18 months to 2 years, depending on how soon you write that exam. And then for those who really get hooked on officialing, you could go further and you could write the FISA exams and become a world rowing umpire. So that's in a nutshell is the journey to become an umpire or an official. And then, as I said, the principle, if we look at rowing, it's all about safety. We've got kids on the water. We know that there is a responsibility that they should be able to swim and so on, but accidents do happen. So safety, safety, safety. As an official out there, we always want to make sure that people are abiding traffic rules. Rowers are moving backwards. They're not seeing what's what's behind them, where they're going. If you haven't got boats obeying traffic rules, you can have collisions, you can have damage to boats, you can have damage to people. When boats capsize, making sure that everyone's safe. Safety, 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 very, very important role of an official. And then the second important role is ensuring fairness. And if we look at fairness, we want to know that all rowers can compete fairly, show respect for their opponents and for the regatta officials, in particular, things like being on time at the start. And then, we expect all rowers to follow the instructions of officials at all times, both on and off the water. And officials, under those circumstances, we ensure that the rules of racing are applied fairly and that each competitor has that opportunity, that fair opportunity to row at their best ability without any other crew impinging on them, creating that atmosphere of respect for all competitors. And with that, I'm going to hand over to Evelyn, who's going to run us through the duties of officials and, as I said, all those different stations where we need officials to run a fair and safe regatta. Thanks, Evelyn.
Thanks, Johan. All right, well, if we look at the duties of officials, there's quite a lot of different positions. And as Johan was saying, you can, if you want to become a national umpire, you would obviously need to get to know all of those positions, other than the electronic timing and finish links. But don't be daunted by that, because if there's a particular area that you'd like to specialize in, you can become a national official in one of those positions. Also, there's quite a lot to each position, and instead of taking this big handbook and trying to plow through it, my suggestion is, when in the beginning, if you volunteered for, say, Control Commission, download the manual, but just look at that, the duties of where you're going to be on that weekend. And if you read through it, it might seem a bit daunting, but then once you've actually done a duty in that position, it becomes far more clear. And once you've done the practical, and it's really not so onerous anymore. So the president of the jury, or as we call it, the POJ, is the person who's in charge of the regatta. And the president of the jury is usually also the safety officer. Then we have a judge at Control Commission who runs that whole area, and they have an administrator, boat checkers, and jetty marshals. We will have coxswain when we have senior regattas, and boat weighing for national and national regattas and championship regattas. Marshals, aligners, and the judge at the start. Then you've got your umpires and starters, pilots, judge at the finish in the tower that you see, your scribe and timekeepers, and then you have heads races, additional timekeepers, and then electronic timing and results, which is your regatta master, and the finish links, which is the camera system. So that's basically quite a lot of positions that we need to fill every weekend, and each of them is really quite specialized, but everybody needs to work together to make everything run smoothly. So what do you need to bring? You need to bring a pale blue or white shirt. So if you don't have the official rower grower shirt, it's not a problem. Navy or beige pants or skirts. I don't know how anybody can umpire in a skirt, but anyway, if you want to wear a skirt, that's fine. No supporters shirts. We need to be neutral. And no short shorts or denims. Have a hat. That sun is strong. A clipboard, elastic band. The wind's blowing, you need put the elastic band over the piece of paper, stops it from blowing. And a plastic cover, if it's raining, will save your hemp sheet. Well, we call them hemp sheets. I keep referring to that. Sorry, I should say that the regatta, the draw is what we call a hemp sheet. So everybody needs a copy of the draw. They get handed out at Control Commission, and you need to put that on your clipboard. So you'll need that at each position. A pen, a pencil, and a highlighter. Now you think a pencil, well, when that paper's wet, a pen doesn't write. A pencil is the ideal thing. Binoculars, sunscreen, jacket, rain gear. Can also get quite cold on the water, especially early morning. A power bank and charging cable. And helpful tools, a number 10 and 13 spanner or a multi-tool kit. It's not essential. You don't have to have all these things. Tape, cable ties and shoelaces. But when you're on the water and there's this rower who's panicking because they're on the way to the start and their gate has come loose and they're trying to tighten it up, or there's a problem with the footboard, it's really, really helpful if you can have those tools to help them to get going again. And they're really, really grateful and happy that they're able to race, because that's essentially what we want to do, is to get them to race. We have radios that we use, but we've introduced a WhatsApp system. We use WhatsApp to give the information about changes of race, people, crews in the boat, late entries, scratchings. So we're really only using the radios for calling the races in at the start, and for communication as far as information that's not on the WhatsApp, finding out where a crew is, or calling for safety. If you need to call for safety to come and help with a rower that's capsized, we would use the radio. So there's radio protocol. You need to be aware of announcements and races and don't interrupt, and obviously never critique other officials on the radio, and keep the radio clear with no unnecessary chatter. If there is a rescue in progress, level 1, 2, or 3, if it's a level 1, then there's no chatter on the radio. And you'll learn those radio protocols, especially if you're having to operate one of them. The duties of the officials. The POJ sits, and you can, it's usually at at Control Commission, Regatta Control, but the POJ will walk around, probably go to the tower, check up on how things are going. So the POJ will be moving around and will have a radio with. If you're wanting to call, you first identify who you're calling, who you are, and so it would be POJ, umpire 2, and POJ will say POJ go. So keep it concise when you're calling on the radio. The president of the jury is responsible for coordinating the smooth running of the regatta. If there's delays due to rain and we have to change the start times, the POJ is the only one who would change the regatta time. Also, if races need to be held, which we really don't like to do, there needs to be a really good reason for that. Monitoring on land and water rescue and medical services. Monitoring the weather conditionings and lightning detector. At least now at Rudderplot we do have a lightning system. We need to check when we get there that it is actually working. Convene jury meetings. Our jury meeting would be if there's a protest, and the umpire makes a ruling, and then the crew can put in a protest. The POJ would have to convene a jury to hear the protest, and they would also participate in the fairness committee. The POJ also has to prepare a report after the regatta. So all the sheets from Control Commission and the finish tower, the start times, any yellow cards, red cards have been given, any objections, protests, all has to be reported on after the regatta by the POJ. Control Commission is really the hub of the whole regatta. And I'm sure you've seen, if you've been to Rudderplot, you'll see there's a little station towards the slipways. It's in front of the slipways. And that's where we have our morning meetings, gather for the POJ's meeting in the morning to briefing on that regatta for the day. So this is Control Commission at Rudderplot. You can see those girls trying to hold up the boat so the umpire, the official, can check the boat. Checking boats at Rudderplot. So the duties of Control Commission. Number of duties I'm going to mention are not necessarily done at every single regatta. So for instance, checking eligibility of athletes, we would be more intent on checking them for national and championship regattas. But obviously for a normal regatta, if you see somebody who looks like a senior rowing an under 14 boat, that wouldn't be fair. So you would obviously make inquiries about that. But we don't actually check IDs except for national and championship regattas. We do check for dress code, so we do need to have uniform dress code. Each school has their own tri-suits and uniforms that they wear, so the crews do need to be in uniform for their races. And we do weigh coxes at the Control Commission, and only under 19 coxes. Administration of crew changes, so the crew changes that have to be done on the day. Unfortunately, we do get quite a lot. At a championship regatta, they don't usually allow crew changes. But if you have a look on the regatta notice, which is posted on the entry system, it'll say whether they are allowing late entries at that regatta or not. But there will always generally be crew changes, and you need to make sure that those changes are within the rules. It's no good, you can't have an entry system and then the crew decides, well, actually they don't want to be in that race, they'd like to be in a different race, and they scratch themselves from the one and enter into the other. So it's a fairness issue. And that information from Control Commission would then be sent out on the WhatsApp, and everybody would then be able to see. We keep those messages, race number, and then the detail. We don't like sending images, only text, because the people on the water are having to check those messages to see which boats need to be in the races. One of the most important things of Control Commission is to check the safety of the boats and eligibility of the boats. So things like the bow ball, which that boat has got a very sharp end. If that bow ball is not, it's a safety issue. If they were to crash into another boat, it could do serious damage to the boat and all the rowers. The heel straps, also safety. Bung covers, waterworthiness. So if the boat has certain compartments that are closed off, and if the boat would tip over, it would float. And if those covers don't work, the boat could sink. So, sometimes it's seen to just go through the motions of checking, but when you're at Control Commission, just remember that you're checking for safety. As these are safety issues that we're checking for, not just because we want to have something to do for the day. So they can't have transmitting or receiving equipment, must have a bow number, most important, so that the tower can see the number that's crossed the line, so we get correct results. We also would have boat weighing, usually at always at national and championship regattas. We would weigh boats. So there would be a random selection of boats that get weighed after the race to make sure, again, that it's fair, that they didn't have a boat that was underweight and it wasn't fair to the other crews that boat won. We also control the entry and exit of all the boats to the water for competing and for training. And this again is a safety issue. So the boats need to go through Control Commission. So we check and we make a note of the time that the boat went out and we record it. When a coach comes along and says, I can't find my crew, we know whether they've gone onto the water or not. And if the crew's missing, obviously we need to find them, but we need to know what time they went on the water so we can start looking in the right places. Control Commission liaises with all the other officials as to whereabouts of the crew. And as I said, safety, safety, safety. And obviously there's a radio at Control Commission which gets monitored because the marshal or the umpire might be looking for a crew and there's no information on the WhatsApp. They would then radio into Control Commission to find out if the Control Commission knows the whereabouts of the crew. The cocks weighing, they come between 1 and 2 hours before the first race every day of the regatta. They come to weigh in. Again, fairness. You can't have a cox who weighs less than, for men, 55 and for women, 50 kilograms. And then again, as a safety issue, there's a maximum amount of ballast that the coxes can carry, because you can't have a cox sitting with all this ballast on top of them. And if the boat was to tip over, that they now weighed down by all this inside the boat. School crews can be coxed by a scholar of the same age category or 2 categories younger. What we have introduced is that for under 14s who started rowing octables, we insist that they have an older cox to cox them, because it's, again, a safety issue. These are the boat classes that you will see. So if you're familiar with rowing, then this will be quite easy for you. So sculling is with 2 blades, and that's a scull there with a single scull with 2 blades. A double scull would be a double, so they would end up with 4 blades. A pair is sweep oar. So each rower only has 1 blade. We don't have those boats in this country. You've got a coxless 4, so a 4 minus means no cox. A 4 times means coxed, and that's a quad. So they've got 4 blades, and that's a 4, a quad and a 4. And then we have a coxed 4, a coxed quad, a coxed 8, and a coxed octable. And that's where we insist that the actual cox for the under 14s is of an older age category, because getting all of them to row at the same time, beginning of the season, can be quite challenging. Quite lucky that the first regatta of the season is a senior regatta, so it's going to be a lot easier to get into the swing of things. We're supposed to get notified by the club rep or the coaches at Control Commission as well, who will inform that there's a medical condition in the boat. We obviously don't announce what the condition is over the radio, and the medical will be told what the medical condition is. We would notify the umpire who's taking that race that there's a medical condition. If need be, we would get safety to follow that race. Each competitor, however, is responsible for their own health and fitness, and us umpires as well. We need to make sure that we are also healthy and fit and not going to cause a medical issue on the water. Now, marshals. The marshal for 1 kilometer races would be on the side next to the 1 kilometer start line, and the marshal for the 2 kilometer races would be to the side or behind the 2 kilometer start line. It's a lot easier for the marshal at 2K, because not only are they senior rowers who know where to go and can maneuver their boats much easier because they're more skilled, but the 1 kilometer marshal, if it's a junior and a senior regatta, needs to make sure that those rowers don't go onto the course with a 2 kilometer race bearing down on top of them. So a marshal at the 1K is a very, very crucial position. And here we see our marshals at Ridderplaat. So a marshal will have a pilot, and there's our marshal sitting. They're looking for crews. So the marshal will monitor the WhatsApp. It's a real critical duty. It can be the difference between the regatta running on time and not running on time. So they rack and stack the crews in race groups. So sometimes it's like herding cats, not sheep, because sheep can be herded, cats can't. Sometimes it's really challenging, and the marshal needs to keep their cool and to try and keep the crews in their race groups ready for the umpire to come and take them onto the course. So they keep the crews close to the start, and the umpire would then come. So it's really efficient if the marshal is able to say to the umpire, when the umpire is now coming back from finishing a race. Umpire 1, all your crews are ready for your race except lane 2, who's scratched. So a really efficient marshal will be able to give the umpire the information and have the crews waiting. They record the crew's arrival. So if we're looking for a crew, Control Commission will say, well, they've checked out, and then usually we'll check with the marshal as to whether the marshal has that crew down at the start. Then at least we know where they are. They then hand over the crews to the relevant umpire, and they would check for missing crews. So if a crew wasn't there, they'd usually radio Control Commission and say, I'm missing the quad for race number 3. Can you please tell me in lane 3 where they are? Monitoring the radio as well. So it's quite a busy job. And it's usually it'll be in those little coach boats. So a cushion does not go amiss to sit on. The aligner. Now the aligner will either obviously be at 1 kilometer or at 2K. So the aligners takes the boat, the liner station out and lines it up, and must be in line with those buoys, the start line. The aligner holds a white flag when they are busy aligning. They give clear and concise instructions: back, touch, hold. Not, oh, move up there. So clear instructions so the crews they're not flustered enough as they are once they get there. So we give clear instructions. The aligner will check that the umpire starter is ready, and they'll indicate that the boats are aligned by raising the white flag. So they will say, hold it all crews, and then the umpire will say, attention, go. Only the aligner can check the aligner must check for false starts, and they're the only official who can call a false start, because they can see the line, and they need to call if a crew jumps the start. They need to call a false start, and the umpire will stop the race. And the liner it's to make sure they keep to the racing schedule. So it's important to check what time the race is supposed to start and try and keep the race on time. So now you can see that the lining there, that's pretty good, and depending on conditions and the age of the crews, it's only lane 5 that's slightly out, but with the water drifting, that's not a bad alignment. The assistant aligner will update the program, the hymn sheet, from the WhatsApp messages. Very important to have a stopwatch to take a backup time, but also if we have the electronic timing to start the race. Now the electronic timing Johanna will tell you about a bit later, but basically you starting the time, you're pressing the button to start the timing for that particular race. So it's very important. Also important to take a backup time. So if for whatever reason the people in the tower didn't get the start, they didn't hear the umpire's call and they didn't press their stopwatches, and we don't have electronic timing, or even if we do have electronic timing, that we do take a backup time. So we start the stopwatch for each race, and then if the time box has missed the start, they would call to the liner and say, did you get the start for that race? And then you would do a countdown for them, usually to 1 minute, so they could start their watches to get the time for the race. They mark off the crews as they're coming past, but that's if you can, because the marshal is there to do it. So the timing, starting the timing, taking the backup, and assisting the liner is really the main duties, and monitoring the radio communications. The duties of the umpire. So the umpire is positioned in the middle of the course. They would gather their crews and move on to the start, the crews in front of them. So the umpire would start okay, so the start and I keep talking about the start umpire and the umpire. So at international regattas, you would have a starter who would be on a fixed point, and all they would be doing would be starting the race. The umpire would be the person in the boat following the race down. Now at Rode Plaat, the starter and the umpire are one and the same, and the duties are combined. If you go to Wemmer, you will see that because the umpire is unable to really get in behind the race, you could have a starter team sitting behind the start, and all they would be doing is starting the race, and once the race has moved off a little bit, the umpire would then slot in behind that race. But at Rode Plaat, the start umpire and the umpire is the same, and they're responsible for the start and the conduct of the race. They need to understand the traffic rules, the local rules of that particular venue, and what is published in the regatta notice and displayed at the venue. So you need to understand the traffic patterns and the traffic rules. And make sure you have all the equipment and review your radio protocol, because it's very, very critical. Again, that golden rule, safety and fairness, and the umpire really is there to crucial role in making sure that the safety and the fairness is upheld. So the umpire at the start calls the crew from the holding area and assigns the lanes according to the regatta program. So JP lane 2, please move on to the course. They'd announce the race and marshal the crew. So announcing the start of race 10, junior women under 14 B quads, and they would then call the crews onto the station, onto the course. We call the crew or club, the stroke, and the lane number. Once the umpire has brought the crews up towards the start, they will hand over the race to their aligner and hold out the red flag. If you look at that little man sitting there on the left, he's holding out his red flag, and that needs to be held out nicely so the people in the finish tower can see the red flag. They know that the race is under aligner's order and that the race is about to start. The aligner will then align their boats, and once they call attention, hold it all crews, the umpire will say, raise his red flag up above his head and say, attention, go, and drop the flag. And that's an indication to the crews that the race has started. If there's a false start or a clash, the umpire would wave the red flag to stop rowing, to stop the race. So the red flag is used at the start. It's quite challenging sometimes, umpiring in a little coach boat. You'll see there's a rail there that umpire is holding onto. So if you're the pilot, try not to dump the umpire in the water, because they're holding the loud halo button open to talk to the crews. They're also holding a red flag, and they're not holding that rail. So it's not a good idea to dump the umpire in the water if you can possibly help it. The umpire will then obviously hold on to that once the race has started. The catamarans at Rode Plaat are obviously the better option, and that little umpire boat is not very pleasant. The umpire during the race. So after the command go, you then change to the white flag. The red flag is only, the white flag is used right through the race unless you're wanting to stop the race. The umpire follows the crews in the middle of the course. They will guide you if you are the pilot and say, please move over to lane 3. If you can see that there's a clash about to happen, you need to move over to where, position yourself so you can see whether the crews are out the water. But don't worry, the umpire will guide you if the pilot. We keep all crews clear from the wake, so you don't want to cause unnecessary wake for the crews, because it's very difficult for them to row through big wakes. Sometimes it's unavoidable if there's some very slow rowers and you're needing to follow the rest of the race. It is unavoidable, but if you can possibly help it, don't wake any boats down. Now, crews are allowed to leave their lanes as long as it doesn't interfere with other boats or become a danger to them or other crews. So there you see the umpire with a white flag. If he sees the crews going out of their water and they're going to interfere with another crew, he'd call the crew, lane 2, St. Benedict's, and he'd move over. He'd put the flag in the direction that the crew has to move in. We'll cover all of these things in the actual umpires training. This is just to give you an idea of really what these official positions are all about. There we have a nice catamaran. It has a nice steering wheel. They don't turn very easily. Take huge turning circle to turn, and they're following this crew down. It's got a really nice view of the race. The umpire will always stand. Your pilot can sit on the seat to steer, and they're following that race down. There again, we have some umpires in a small little coach boat. See the umpires holding onto that rail. Now, when the umpire gets to the finish, they need to wait 10 to 15 seconds to determine if there's any crews who feel that they've been impeded, another crew came into their water and they want to object that it wasn't a fair race. If the umpire, it's the umpire's job to see if it what the objection is, and then to either uphold or overrule that objection. And you would advise the crew of the decision, and if necessary, consult with other officials to find if you need information. Ask the tower who crossed the finish line first, ask the line if there was a problem at the start, or officials coming past, but you can never ask the POJ because they would be involved with a jury meeting if there was an objection. So you cannot ask the POJ to help you with a ruling. It is the umpire's decision, and then a protest can be made thereafter. If there is no objections, the umpire will wave the white flag to the tower. Hopefully the tower sees and responds. That means the race is cleared. The results can be published. If there's an objection, the red flag is waved, which means hold the results until there's a decision on that objection. Your pilots. So as you saw, there was quite a lot for your umpire to do, bringing down the race from the start to the finish. But it's really nice to get up and close and say, I'm saying, ladies, don't get intimidated by going on the water. The men love being on the water. And I know we are very good at organizing and paperwork, but you know what? It's lovely to be on the water as well. So don't be worried about being pilots or marshals or umpires. It's really great fun out there. The pilot, you need to be there earlier to organize the boat and equipment. So we do have Andre who does organize the boats for us, but as a pilot, you need to make sure that the petrol tank is in, that you have petrol, but obviously make sure that you have the right tank for the right boat, because some of the boats have oil in the fuel and some of them don't, depending on the type of motor. You need a red and white flag, the radio, hymn sheet, which is your regatta draw, which you'll get a control commission, and then safety equipment, 2 life jackets, a paddle, a bailer, or a pump. I've never seen a pump, but a bailer, half a Coke bottle or a dish of some sort is always a good idea to have to bail water out. If you in one of those little coach boats, they can sometimes take on quite a bit of water. The life jackets are also quite handy to sit on as a cushion if they're not being used as a life jacket. Your pilot is the umpire's second pair of eyes. The umpire cannot be watching every boat in 8 lanes at all times, and your pilot needs to be that second pair of eyes. This next one I don't necessarily agree with. It's a debatable. I don't think that the poor pilot can take a backup time. I think the aligner's assistant is in the best position to do that. The pilot will call the race in at the start for the umpire. When the umpire hands over to the aligner, they will call the race in to the tower, and they will hold the radio open so that when the umpire says attention go, the people in the tower can actually hear the attention go. They also, at that point, starting to move the boat forward to follow the race. So I'm not sure which hand they're using to take a backup time, but if you can do it, then that's great. Pilot, be careful of the wake. Go up the course at full speed, but never ever turn at full speed. She must always come to a complete stop, 300 to 500 meters ahead of oncoming race. 300 if they slow boats, if it's great, if it's big, if the last race of the day, they can move pretty fast. You shouldn't be coming down ahead of them. Stop, idle, stop and then turn and idle off the course and wait for the race to pass. Then you go back onto the course and proceed down the middle of the course again. In that way, the wake flows out towards the banks and we don't get cross wakes. Us rowers like to row on nice smooth water. The wind is bad enough without the boats causing big wake in lots of different directions. Basic boat piloting skills is very important, and for those people who do have pilot's license, it's great. Johan's probably going to be organizing piloting to have boat do your qualifications if you also want to get a pilot license. Our boats motors are small enough that we don't have to have the license, but having that license is a great advantage because you do know all the rules and safety issues, SAMHSA rules on the water. How to approach an oncoming race. Stop well ahead of the race, turn 90 degrees off, idle off the course. When the race passes, return onto the course. If a boat capsizes, most important, that's why you need to know your boats and the boat class and how many people are in the boat. Is it coxed? If it's a quad and it's coxed, there should be 5 heads. You need to count the heads and ensure that all the rows are okay. If you can see all of them and they're all okay, you call to safety, to rescue and tell them that there's a capsized boat, but it's not a priority 1, it's a priority 3, and they will go and assist if needed. If you cannot see all the heads and you may need to abandon the race because our first thing is for safety. You need to notify rescue and attend to the rescue if necessary. When you're approaching, be really, really careful. Disengage the propeller, and if necessary, if you can't see all of them, you need to jump in the water. So I hope you can all swim, and you need to jump in and assist the rowers. Quite useful to use the umpire boat to stabilize the rowing boat while the crews get in because it's very wobbly, especially your scull. If you can assist the rower to get back into the boat. But rescue can be called, and if rescue is there, obviously you need to be concerned about the rest of the race that's continuing, and that the fairness and safety of the other crews is also important. The official at the finish, the officials sit in the tower on the finish line. This is the view from the tower at Rudderplaat. That water looks really, really nice and smooth. Beginning of the day, all the spectators there. It's a really nice view from that tower. Here we have our timekeepers who are taking finish times as the crews cross the line. So we have a judge at the finish who's in charge of the finish tower, and the scribe is the person would write down as the crews cross the finish line. The judge at the finish will call the bow number, and the scribe's job is to write those bow numbers down as the judge at the finish calls them. So primary role to record the finish order of the crew. Then we have timekeepers who would take start times. So they're looking through binoculars down at the start. 1 kilometer is a whole lot easier than 2 kilometers. So anybody who has those bird scopes or those long, they're quite useful, good pair of binoculars. We do have binoculars in a bag that go up to the tower, but if you have your own that you want to use, then they're really good binoculars. It's easier to see the crews and that umpire holding up the red flag, the better. So good idea to have that. The judge at the finish will either hoot when the crew crosses the line to indicate that they've crossed, but the hoot is not meant to be necessary on the line, just notification to the crew that they've actually crossed the line. Most important to note and record the lane number. And then once all the crews have crossed the line, to acknowledge the umpire, if he's waving his white flag, that he's cleared the race, and you either wave your white flag back at him or 2 hoots indicates that the race is cleared. If there's no white flag, then the umpire will not clear the race, no white flag, no hoots, and will hold the results until such time as that has been sorted out. The judge at the finish then signs the results sheet and sends it down to the regatta master, who records it on the electronic system. Right, so I'm going to hand back to Johan at this point, and he's going to go through the electronic timing. Johan, you're going to take back control there?
Yep, I'm trying. There we go. So as Evelyn explained over there, when they're in that tower, you've got people actually taking the time, and they're watching through binoculars, and when they see that red flag drop, that's the point when you hit the clock. But we do also have the possibility of electronic timing, and that's at one point, if you recall, Evelyn did say the liner's assistant, there would be a button that you push. So that's what we're talking about. So timing is really important, especially in some places where we have heads races. It's really important, critical that we get those times correctly. When we have heats, so there's more than 8 boats, so we have to have a couple of heats. It's important that the timing is absolutely accurate, because depending on the number of heats, there's a couple of boats that progress. The second boat may progress, but then the next boats would depend on time. So timing is a critical part here. If we look at electronic timing, it's made up of 2 systems. They can be fully integrated, or they can run independent, or we only have the one. Now, Regatta Master, that is the one system that is always there, and that's a integrated Windows app, which is used to manage all the aspects of registration and the results. And then the other component, which is the nice part that we add on whenever we can, that's the link system. And that is the automatic timing system that captures the time with a photo finish, capturing up to 10,000 frames per second. So it's extremely accurate. So if we look at that link system, a start signal is relayed to the finish tower from an official that's on the aligner station. So on the aligner, we'll have this antenna with up on a big white pole, and the aligner's assistant's going to have this little button in their hand. And when the umpire drops his flag and says go, that's the time you push and hold the button, and that sends a signal to the link system that the race has started. The camera's over there, and as the boats cross over the line, it records the time from relative to the time when you started it, and that's how it works out the time. More accurate than that, we cannot get. So what does one of these photo finishes look like? Those of you who are rowing are going to say, those are awful rowers. Look where their oars are. They're not in sync at all. Well, that's because this is a whole lot of photos that have been composited together. So each photo has been taken on the finish line, and then they've been put together. And you can see in this specific race, which was a World Championship in 2010, boat number 4, there on the red line is the first bow ball, And then you can see boat number 3 in the front of the photo and boat number 6 in the back of the photo. That was a photo finish. They were really close to each other, but you can see 6's bow ball was just ahead, and then came in 3, and then boat number 2, and finally boat number 5. So that's what a photo finish looks like. And, you know, from time to time, especially in championship races, we've had, you know, we every season we have a couple of really close finishes. Sometimes it's first to the second. And then, you know, when we have the link system running, we're able to actually get that finish recorded correctly and fairly award the first and second prize. So as I said, you've got these two systems. This system, the Regatta Master system, that is at every single regatta. If we don't have the link system there, the Regatta Master is capturing those times manually. Once they're in, they are sent up into the cloud and immediately available on the rowing site where you can see the results. If we have the link system in place, it's recording those times, recording those results, and feeding it into the Regatta Master, and the Regatta Master can then confirm that, check it with the manual system, and release it, and immediately it's onto the internet. So that's the timing system. Another photo from up in the timing tower, the best seat in the house. Beautiful view from up there. You can see the racers as they progress coming down. But in front of you over here, there's the links camera that's you know, put in correctly onto the finish line and is able to take those accurate photos. And there's another view, and there you can see the view from the finish tower all the way up the dam. So, you know, you can watch that race progressing as it comes down all the way from the 2000 to the 1000 all the way through. Really worthwhile. If you're a new person, make sure that you get your opportunity up in the tower as a timekeeper, if you want to have a good view of the races. So Evelyn's taken you through all the main stations that we need, where we need umpires and where we need officials. We sort of like said, you know, as new people, as new volunteers, we really welcome you to come and join us. We rely on you to come and join us. For our children to really be able to enjoy racing and be able to race, we need between 30 and 40 officials for each of those sessions. And we rely on parents each year to come and join us. Some of you remain volunteers, and that's good. We need those volunteers. But hopefully we have a good number of you that come through and actually, you know, get to know the rules of racing, write the exam, and become national officials, because we need national officials, especially when we're having championships. So what's next? Sign up as a trainee official, and I hope all of you that are on the call, and I see a lot of new names here this evening, really pleased to see that. I hope you've all, you know, sent a message through to Annabelle, who very kindly sets up our rosters, saying that you are available so she can assign you somewhere. Familiarize yourself with the rules of racing, and as Evelyn said, you know, if this time you're on Control Commission, just go and familiarize yourself with the rules of Control Commission. Don't be overwhelmed by all the rules. Just, you know, look at that part and come and do Control Commission, and after the day, go and have a look at them again. And soon it will become second nature. Likewise, when you get onto the water, if you're with the umpire, go and familiarize yourself with what the umpire is doing. Spend the day with the umpire, chat to the umpire, ask questions. If you've been on the water a couple of times and it's not a national championship, umpire is likely to give you an opportunity to take down a race. That's how we learn. And then, as I say, afterwards, go and have a look at those rules again, and everything suddenly starts falling into place. Get involved. Attend training sessions. Volunteers for duties on the water and off the water. As I said, Annabelle is the one who kindly puts that together. You know, if you've been somewhere and she's put you in that place again, send Annabelle a message and say, hey, is there any chance I could get into the tower, or is there any chance I can get onto a marshal boat? spend this season really trying to get around to all the different stations and seeing what it's all about. And then visit our Grow website for information. All the important links are there. You'll find the rules. You'll find the manual for officials. All those documents are there. All the information about when training is, when exams are going to happen, all can be found there. So what happens on the day? We work with 2 shifts, a morning shift and an afternoon shift. The school that's hosting the regatta feeds us, waters us. So really you just have to arrive there, report to POJ when you arrive. Usually you want to try and arrive at least 50 to 60 minutes before the first race, because if you're a marshal or a umpire or a pilot for an umpire, you've got to get your equipment onto your boat. You've got to make sure there's fuel on the boat. And then somewhere between 45 to 30 minutes before official race time, POJ usually has a briefing session, or not usually, always has a briefing session. That's just to check that all the officials are there, just go over a couple of key things that have to happen in the day, re-emphasize, some of the safety rules and regulations, and then we go out onto the water. And as we said, for each shift, we need somewhere between 30 and 40 officials, depending on the size of the regatta. And then don't forget, there aren't any angels out there that put equipment onto the water and take it off the water. It's us as the officials. So please, at the end of every regatta, make sure you take all the equipment off the boats, take it back to the boat shed. And we really appreciate ways if there's a couple that can remain behind to help us to take boats off the water if we need to. And the most important rule, we're out there, it's fun. Let's have fun. Our children are having fun. If there's enough of us, many hands make light work. If there's enough of us that know what we're doing, we can always be helping those around us that are learning, and it really ends up being a fun day. So, dare to join. There's a nice little brochure out there that Fatini put together for us, and I think there's an electronic version of it as well. It's a real nice cheat sheet. On the back, we have all the different duties with the key points on what has to happen in each of those duties. If you haven't got one of those yet, get hold of one of those. It's a great help. And, my ask here, there's a good number of you here, but we need more people. So get hold of this Dare to Join brochure, and please share it with the other parents in your respective schools. The future of rowing for our schools and whether we can do this properly depends on how many volunteers we can get in and how many of us are prepared to go through and actually go that extra effort, really get to know the rules and become national officials. Without officials, we cannot offer rowing to our children. So I really want to say a big thank you for all of you guys that have joined us this evening. Looking forward to meeting you over the weekend. And, from here on until the Gauteng Champs wins at end of October, beginning of November, we've pretty much got a regatta every single weekend. So plenty of opportunity to learn. Please use it. Please bring others along with you. And let's have a successful rowing season for our children this year. With that, thank you for everyone for attending, and I think we'll open up for any questions and comments.
Can I just, before we go to that, I need to make an appeal really. Now that we've gone through all the positions and really had an overview, one of the areas that we really need people, anybody who's interested in getting involved with the regatta master. Philip, who I'm sure a lot of you know, and if you don't know him, you'll get to know him. He's the regatta master Fundi, and he's there at every single regatta, but he does need help, and we need people to really specialize in that regatta master position. Doesn't mean to say that you can't learn all the other positions, but for anybody who's interested in getting involved in the electronic side and the regatta master side, please just pop Annabelle a note and say, look, how can you get a hold of Philip? Because we do need to get people trained up in that area. The more people we have trained on regatta master, then the more opportunity there is for you to also work at other positions. I think at the moment we really only have 2 people who are specialized in that area, and obviously they can't be at every single regatta. And without that, we don't get our results up. Those results are not going to go up electronically. It's not going to be properly recorded. The kids are going to be unhappy. The parents are going to be shouting. The coaches are going to be unhappy. So it really, really is critical. Also, anybody who's interested in getting involved with the boats and the piloting side, we can, Johan, Andre kind of looks after that boat side, is looking for somebody to become sort of 2RC to him. He's not always around. He does commercial diving, is not always around, and we do need somebody to make sure that our boats are looked after correctly and the right petrol and the right fuel with the right oil does go into the boat, because we can't all know all that. And if you put the wrong one in, we can be quite costly to the motors if we get it wrong. So if anybody's interested, please let Annabelle know and we can then put you in touch with the right people. Thank you. Yes, questions? Anybody? Are you still there, Johan?
Yes, I'm still here, Evelyn.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've shocked them or put them to sleep.
Yeah. No. Thanks, Evelyn. Thanks for going through all of that, and thank you again very much for everybody who has joined. Look out for us. You'll see the officials that have been around for a while. They'll probably have their tag around their neck with their name on and stuff. Don't be shy to ask. And as I say, enjoy it. It's a lovely sport to be involved with. It's lovely to be out there with our children and seeing them grow through rowing as they go through the different age groups until they end off as senior rowers, and have good fun.
Right, thanks. And I will be POJ at the regatta this weekend. So if you're wanting to come down to Control Commission and just get an idea of what's going on, or come and help out a bit, then just come and see me and we'll see what we can organize.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Have a good evening.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night. Thanks.